On Imola race weekend, it was once more time for the Eurovision Song Contest, taking place in Dublin, following Johnny Logan's win in 1987. 25 nations took part, with the winner being Switzerland, represented by young French-Canadian singer Céline Dion, whatever happened to her, and her song Ne partez pas sans moi, who beat the UK's Scott Fitzgerald and Go by just 1 point, while Austria's Wilfried garnered the infamous nul point for his song Lisa Mona Lisa. It was election week in France, with both the presidency and the legislature on the ballot. Guy Ligier's old friend François Mitterrand had been president since 1981 and was seeking re-election to another 7-year term, but 2 years earlier the conservative Rassemblement pour la République (RPR) party, led by its founder Jacques Chirac, had won a parliamentary majority, and for the last 2 years there had been an uneasy power-sharing agreement, with President Mitterrand looking after foreign affairs and defence policy, and Chirac's cabinet doing everything else. In 1988, Chirac stood for the presidency too, while Mitterrand's Socialist Party hoped to overturn the RPR's legislative majority. In the end, a combination of a declining vote for the French far left and rising support for far-right parties, particularly the Front National under Jean-Marie Le Pen, saw the Socialist Party gain votes and the RPR lose them, and Mitterrand was re-elected, with the Socialists regaining a majority in the Parliament with a big swing. In the aftermath, Jacques Chirac resigned from the leadership of the party he had created, returning for the time being to his other job, the small matter of being Mayor of Paris. In the UK, the first 16-year-old students sat the new General Certificate of Secondary Education, GCSE, exams, which had been created as a universal qualification replacing the old 2-tier O-level and CSE certificates, and unlike the previous exams will be graded according to a set standard rather than relative to other students. Monaco Grand Prix weekend was also the FA Cup final, played at Wembley. Last year's final had produced a shock as unfancied Coventry City beat Spurs, and 1988 saw another potential upset on the cards as the almighty Liverpool, already crowned league champions, faced Wimbledon, a team who had only been in the top division for a couple of years. The Wimbledon team were known in the British media as much for their antics off-pitch as on it. Players such as Dennis Wise, Vinnie Jones, John Fashanu and Laurie Sanchez, captained by goalkeeper Dave Besant, were fond of practical jokes and hazing rituals like tying a new teammate to the roof of the car and driving along the A3 at high speed, while on the pitch they had gained a reputation as hard tackling, direct and often violent. Laurie Sanchez put Wimbledon ahead after 37 minutes, and Dave Besant played an absolute blinder for the entire match, including being the first keeper to save a penalty in the FA Cup final. BBC commentator John Motson declared that
the crazy gang have beaten the Culture Club,
and the name stuck. Normally the Crazy Gang would have been playing in the European Cup Winners' Cup next year, but due to the ongoing ban on English teams competing in European competitions, they could not, which was perhaps just as well for the reputation of English football. Now, you may have spotted my deliberate mistake last time by posting the post-Brazil tables, not the post-Imola ones at the end of the race. So as the teams prepare for the Monaco Grand Prix, here are the actual standings in the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships. And while does this count as breaking the fourth wall? Anyway, thanks to Big Zeddy for supplying me with the footage for this race taken from the BBC's highlights package. The full race available through my usual sources was not of great quality. Plus, we get to hear some drivers wishing the BBC coverage show, simply called Grand Prix, a happy 10th birthday in their own languages.
Bon anniversaire, Grand Prix.
Har den här en Grand Prix på 10-årsjubileet.
Bon compleanno Grand Prix. Grand Prix, Tanjovi, omedetou.
Yes, it's Grand Prix's 10th anniversary, and it's happening here at the most exciting and glamorous Grand Prix of the year, Monaco. And it's my pleasure to make the first cut. Now, all together, gentlemen. 1, 2, 3.
Happy birthday, Grand Prix!
Some teams stopped off at Nogaro in southwestern France to do some testing at the Circuit Paul Armagnac before arriving in Monaco, which helped Williams to nail down the electrical problem that had been leading to engine overheating. AGS, meanwhile, had taken the opportunity of a race close to their home base to get in some more wind tunnel time at Saint-Cyr, and had revised aerodynamics in Monaco and, a first in the team's history, a spare car. It was also incidentally revealed that Minardi's aerodynamics had been developed not in a wind tunnel but underwater, which might explain a lot. Their fellow Italian minnows Ozella had, after some frantic work, now got a legal car again, and Real owner Günther Schmidt was rumoured to have fallen out with designer Gustav Brunner already, the latter allegedly on his way to Zakspeed. True to chaotic form, De Cesaris started off the weekend by writing off another chassis, bouncing off Berger in the tunnel. Then the spare broke down and the team incurred a massive fine by changing the battery out on track. It was Stefano Modena turn to spare everyone from pre-qualifying, as the Italian was excluded from the meeting for missing a weight check in the first practice session, bringing the field down to the regulation 30. He might look a little aggrieved at De Cesaris' continued participation after Real's battery antics, but rules is rules. Anyone hoping the narrow confines of the street circuit would level the playing field was quickly disappointed, as Senna and Prost once more dominated qualifying, with nobody else really coming close in either session. In the end, it was Senna putting in a massive lap to maintain his 100% pole record for 1988, an impressive 1.4 seconds ahead of Prost, with Berger third, another 1.2 seconds back from the McLarens. Alboreto made the second row an all-red affair, with Mansell and Nannini top of the atmospherics behind them. Patrese put his Williams 8th between the Arrows twins, and Jonathan Palmer, who loves Monaco, was a career-best 10th. Nelson Piquet, who hates Monaco, could do no better than 11th, and would line up alongside Streff in the AGS, another man in his best ever grid position. The March team were all at 6s and 7s, with nothing going right in 14th and 22nd. Boutsen's Benetton had a series of problems stopping him from putting in a decent lap, and he would start 16th. The Ligiers did qualify at least, though Johansson only just made it. He would line up alongside Larini in the newly legal Ozella, while Nakajima, another Monaco phobe, suffered the indignity of failing to qualify in a Works Lotus 6.6 seconds behind Ayrton Senna using the exact same engine. He was joined on the pit wall by Campos, who'd hit Palmer and bent his car, Bailey, still using the short wheelbase Tyrrell, and Schneider, who'd had his best time disallowed for an ever so slightly oversized air duct. Not only had McLaren been impressive so far in 1988, but Senna and Prost had Monaco sewn up between them for the last several years, so everyone was expecting one of the two Marlboro cars to win today, as 25 cars made their way round the parade lap, and René Arnoux sat in the pits glumly having his electrics fettled. He would start from the pit lane. Poor Streff's race, though, was done before it even started. His throttle cable snapped on the parade lap, and he rolled into the pits to retire before the start. As ever, all eyes were on Saint-Devote as the lights went red, then green, and 24 cars charged off the grid. Senna got into the first corner first, with Berger nicking second. Almost everyone made it through Saint-Devote in one piece, except for Alex Caffey, who was punted into the barriers by Capelli. Up front, Senna was already pulling away slightly from Berger, with Prost third, then Mansell, Alboreto, Nannini, Patrese, Warwick and Palmer. Senna was 2.5 seconds clear at the end of lap 1 as Piquet came in to retire, having had his nose cone trodden on by Cheever. Over the first few laps, two separate battles developed on the track, one between Berger and an increasingly frustrated Prost over second, and one between Mansell in fourth and the trio of Italians following him. Prost was harrying Berger all the way, desperate to get past and get off after Senna before he got too far ahead. It was already 7.5 seconds on lap 6, and Ayrton was pulling away all the time. And with overtaking always a problem at Monaco, that was how things stayed for lap after lap, with Senna continuing to pull away, Berger continuing to stymie Prost, and Mansell easing away a bit from Alboreto. As the cameras watched Senna lapping immaculately away, the only real incidents to watch were the odd retirement. Tarquini's suspension broke, Larauri's brakes failed, pitching him into the barriers at lows, and Cheever and De Cesaris and both Ligiers had engine failures. Prost was getting increasingly desperate behind Berger, and evidently Alboreto was likewise frustrated behind Mansell, because on lap 33 he made a somewhat ambitious move as Mansell braked for the swimming pool, which ended with Mansell backwards in the barriers and Alboreto continuing serenely onwards. Senna was by now about a third of a lap ahead of Berger and Prost, and Alboreto had Nannini and Patrese closing on him once more, while just behind the top six was Warwick, who was enjoying a terrific off-camera scrap with a fired-up Palmer. Those behind moved up a place when Nannini's gearbox seized up at Saint-Devote on the stroke of half-distance. Patrese had a hair-raising moment on lap 51 when Alio moved over in front of him, clipped the Williams and crashed, somehow managing to avoid taking Patrese into the barriers with him. Ricciardo came in for a precautionary pit stop, which promoted Jonathan Palmer up into the points just in time to be lapped by Senna, who soon passed Warwick too. A couple of laps later, Prost finally found his way past Berger on the start-finish straight. Ironically, after all the waiting, the cameras completely missed it. By this time, Prost was 50 seconds behind with 23 laps to go, so it was going to be a bit of an ask, but Alain was certainly going to give it a bash as the ever-cheerful Ghinzani strolled in after his Zakspeed's gearbox had given up. Prost set the fastest lap and Senna immediately responded, as the TV cameras gave the viewers a rare look at Palmer's Tyrrell, Uncle Ken no doubt hoping that some nice exposure would fill some of those big blank spaces on his car with sponsor stickers. Prost went faster again, Senna responded again, and the two traded a few more fastest laps before Ron Dennis got on the pit car radio and asked them both please to just finish before one of them did something silly. Which, of course, is exactly what Senna did. A momentary lapse of concentration is all it takes at Monaco, and on lap 67 of 78, he stuffed it in the barrier just in front of the tunnel. Ayrton, absolutely livid with himself, stalked off and took off his helmet, gloves and overalls, and walked straight back to his Monaco flat to stew. Prost inherited P1 with a 13-second lead over Berger, with Alboreto 3rd, Warwick 4th, Palmer 5th, and Dalmas up into 6th in the other Lola. Patrese took the last point off him in the closing laps, probably overtaking the Lola a bit warily, but all eyes were on Prost as he took his 4th Monaco Grand Prix win and his 30th career victory. Dalmas will have been disappointed to miss out on a point so close to the end, but he could be very happy with 7th. Boutsen trailed in 8th and 2 laps down after a truly awful race for Benetton. Lorini brought the Azella home 9th, and the team will have celebrated like they'd won, and bringing up the rear was Capelli, who'd had to stop to repair the damage caused by nerfing Caffey into the barriers at the start and spent the rest of the race slowly working his way back up the field to finish 10th, 6 laps down. He was lifted from the car in a state of exhaustion with both legs almost completely numb from the confines of the cramped cockpit. Michele Alboreto had the decency to look a bit sheepish on the podium and went to find Mansell afterwards, took full blame and apologised. McLaren, meanwhile, didn't hear from Senna until the evening when he reappeared as they were packing up, finally having calmed down. Senna's crash had seen him slip to 3rd in the standings behind twice runner-up Gerhard Berger, with Ferrari consolidating their 2nd place, and Williams picked up their first point of the year and Judd's first ever point as an engine supplier. So after 2 races in Europe, it was back across the Atlantic again for the 3-race North American Tour, always a test of endurance for both human and machine, especially with the punishing Detroit circuit last in the programme when both spare parts and team stamina would be running low.